Warning, this show contains truth, sarcasm, and opinions that might offend the fragile, the fake, and the fact-free. If you're still hashtagging resistance, clutching your Fauci bobblehead, or think the government can fix your feelings, this isn't your sanctuary. We serve our news black. No soy, no sugar, and definitely no CNN sprinkles. Buckle up, Patriots. It's data and dissonance, and we're about to drop the truth you won't hear on the evening news.
Tonight on Data and Dissonance, Ayatollah Khamenei tells President Trump to keep dreaming, even as Iran's economy collapses under UN-backed sanctions. Back home, a federal court greenlights Trump's guard deployment into Portland, because apparently burning downtown twice wasn't enough practice. And while America argues over spending cuts, the White House just broke ground on a $250 million ballroom. Because nothing says fiscal responsibility like champagne chandeliers during a shutdown threat. This is Tuesday, October 21st. Let's get into it. All right, folks, time to bring in the crew before Khamenei tries to hack our Wi-Fi. First up, Brian, the human MAGA bonfire himself. Last week he said, sanctions work better than marriage counseling. And judging by the headlines, he might be right. Then there's Rachel, our voice of reason, or as the internet calls her, the adult in the room. She brings the facts, the context, and a suspicious number of bookmarked CSPAN clips. Daniel joins us from whatever undisclosed bunker he uses to connect global conspiracies to your grocery bill. If something explodes tonight, he probably predicted it. And rounding out the table, Skylar, the progressive heartbeat of the panel, here to remind us that sometimes diplomacy isn't a four-letter word. Together, they make chaos sound like conversation. Let's light the fuse. All right, let's start with the global powder keg, Tehran. Over the weekend, Ayatollah Khamenei dismissed Trump's ultimatum like it was junk mail, saying the US can keep dreaming if it thinks Iran's going to bend. Meanwhile, new UN-backed sanctions, reinstated after that precision strike on Iran's nuclear infrastructure, are choking what's left of their economy. Gas lines, blackouts, and even reports of protests in Qom and Shiraz. But here's the twist. Despite the economic collapse, Iran's Revolutionary Guard is still pushing weapons into Syria and Lebanon. So the question tonight, does pressure make peace, or does it push us closer to another Middle East showdown? Brian, I'll throw it to you first, because I know you've been waiting for this one like it's the sequel to Top Gun.
Artie, I've been saying it for months. Trump doesn't bluff, and Tehran knows it. These sanctions are the first real pressure that regimes felt since Obama sent them pallets of cash. Khamenei can play tough for the cameras, but behind those palace walls, he's panicking. Their currency's in free fall, unemployment's north of 40%, and their oil exports are basically on life support. This isn't saber rattling, it's strategy. Trump's showing that peace through strength works. You don't negotiate with terrorists, you starve their funding, crush their black markets, and make it impossible for them to fund proxy wars. And let's not forget, Biden let that nuclear deal rot for years. Trump came back and said, "We're done pretending." That's leadership.
So you're calling it the maximum pressure sequel, but without the Hollywood ending. Rachel, you've been cautious about escalation before. Do you see this as deterrence or provocation?
A bit of both, honestly. Sanctions are effective when they're targeted, but blanket measures often end up hurting ordinary civilians more than the regime. Iran's leadership has proven time and again they'll let their people suffer if it keeps the theocracy intact. What's interesting now is that the protests inside Iran aren't anti-American, they're anti-regime. People are chanting against Khamenei, not against Trump. That's a rare window where outside pressure might actually crack the foundation. But I'll caution this. If the US pushes too far, too fast, it risks giving hardliners a reason to rally around the flag again. We've seen that cycle before. So, yes, Trump's strength is working, but diplomacy still has to be on standby, or it all turns into another forever crisis.
Good point. Strength without strategy can turn into static. Daniel, I can already see you about to connect a few dots that'll scare half the Pentagon. What's your read?
Oh, you know me too well, Artie. Look, what nobody's talking about is how fast this escalation happened after China pulled out of that oil for tech pipeline deal with Iran. The timing's not coincidence. You choke their oil, you choke their leverage. The CIA knows it, Moscow knows it, and so does Beijing. Iran's regime was counting on a BRICS backdoor, but when Russia shifted its focus back to its own economy, Iran was left out in the cold. Now Trump's move to coordinate with the UN on sanctions, that's the tell. The intel world is playing multi-board chess. This isn't about one country, it's about signaling to everyone else. If you side with terror, we'll break your bank before we ever fire a bullet.
Leave it to Daniel to turn sanctions into spycraft. Skylar, I can almost feel you loading your rebuttal. Jump in.
Yeah, I'm going to say what everyone else is avoiding. Collective punishment doesn't make us safer. Starving a population into rebellion sounds good on paper until you realize the ones who rise up are usually the ones with nothing left to lose. And that creates more chaos, not less. I don't defend Iran's regime, but I also don't buy into the bombs and blockades doctrine that's defined U.S. foreign policy for decades. Every time we isolate, China and Russia fill the gap. If the U.S. really wanted change, it would empower Iranian youth, women, and reform movements, not just slap sanctions and call it victory. Because right now, we're watching ordinary Iranians pay for the sins of their leaders, and that's not moral high ground. That's geopolitics with blinders on.
Fair point, Skylar. Moral cost meets realpolitik. So here's where we land, folks. Iran's daring the world to blink first. Trump's betting that economic collapse beats military conflict. Khamenei's betting the U.S. won't hold the line when oil prices spike. Someone's about to learn what happens when your poker face meets Trump's playbook. All right, we're going to take a quick breath and spin the globe back home. Because while the Middle East is burning, so is Portland's legal inbox. All right, back on home turf, and it's getting spicy. A divided federal appeals panel just gave President Trump the green light to send federalized National Guard units into Portland after yet another round of riots and autonomous zone nonsense downtown. Oregon's governor called it a constitutional hijacking. Trump called it Tuesday. The court basically said, yeah, the Insurrection Act still exists. And now the Ninth Circuit is scrambling to decide whether to rehear the case. So we're right back in the age-old tug of war. States' rights versus federal power. Brian, I can already see that grin. Go ahead, set the tone.
You bet I'm grinning, Artie. Because finally, we have a president who's enforcing law and order instead of tweeting about expressive chaos. Portland's been a mess for years. Burnt-out precincts, smashed storefronts, the whole Summer of Love rerun. When local officials won't protect citizens, the Constitution gives Washington the tools to step in. Trump didn't create the chaos, he inherited it, and every mayor who tied the cops' hands helped it spread. This ruling says, enough. The law doesn't stop at a city line. If mobs can torch courthouses without consequence, the feds have every right to roll in, secure the area, and remind everyone that civil liberty doesn't mean civil anarchy.
You're practically volunteering to drive the Humvee yourself, Brian. Rachel, balance us out. Constitutional principle versus public perception. Where's the line?
The line is razor thin. Yes, the Insurrection Act gives presidents broad power, but historically, it's been used sparingly. Think Little Rock, 1957, not Portland, 2025. The optics matter. When federal troops show up in an American city, it conjures images of overreach. Legally, Trump's on solid ground if there's proof local authorities can't maintain order. Politically, it's a minefield. If even one incident turns ugly, wrong crowd control, viral video, the narrative flips from restoring peace to occupying force. The lesson here? Assert the law, but do it with restraint. The public remembers images, not statutes.
Always the voice of caution. Daniel, I can feel your conspiracy radar buzzing like an old ham radio. Where does this fit on the board?
Oh, it's lit up, my friend, because this isn't just about Portland. Look at timing. Deep state bureaucrats in D.C. have been trying to claw back executive control since Trump 2.0 started. The Portland deployment is a shot across the bow, a message that federal authority won't bow to blue state governors who act like monarchs. Behind the curtain, Defense Intel's testing new coordination between National Guard's cyber units and domestic ops. It's part of a larger plan to counter organized agitators funded through foreign crypto networks. So while the media screams dictator, the real story is a counter-network war. Data, funding, infiltration, all being mapped in real time.
Leave it to Daniel to turn street protests into a spy novel. And somehow, I still buy the ticket. Skylar, you've been vocal about civil rights and overreach. You get the final say before I wrap this one up.
Here's the problem. When we normalize troops on Main Street, democracy starts to look like a police state. Portland's issues are real, but they're supposed to be solved by accountable local leaders, not military intervention. Every time Washington overrides a state, it chips away at the balance of power. Today it's Portland. Tomorrow it's any city that disagrees with the White House. That's not law and order. That's federal intimidation. You can't wave a constitution in one hand and roll tanks with the other. I want safety too, but liberty dies when fear writes the rules.
Strong words, Skylar. And a perfect snapshot of where America stands, caught between the need for order and the price of freedom. For Trump, it's a win on paper and a gamble in practice. The court said yes, but the court of public opinion hasn't even opened yet. All right, before we jump from riot shields to red carpets, quick reminder. This show runs on caffeine, conviction, and pure Gen X stubbornness. So if you want to keep us dropping truth every night, hit up the Data and Dissonance merch store at data-and-dissonance.printify.me. We've got 3 American roasted coffee blends to keep you fired up through every news cycle. High Lakes Light Roast, smooth, bright, and optimistic. Kind of like how the media pretends the economy looks. Rock Creek Medium Roast, balanced and bold, perfect for patriots who still believe common sense should be bipartisan. Bitterroot Dark Roast, strong enough to wake a liberal mid-rant, guaranteed to taste better than government coffee. And while you're there, grab the gear. We're talking Gen X built different raised right tees, non-binary bumper stickers, Data and Dissonance hoodies, trucker hats, mugs, tote bags, and socks that'll trigger a whole Starbucks line. Every order helps keep the lights on, the mics hot, and the message uncensored. So if you believe truth should still have a voice, sip it, wear it, share it. That's data-and-dissonance.printify.me. Fuel the freedom, one cup at a time. Okay, now this one's got the whole country doing a double take. The East Wing's half demolished, marble trucks are rolling in, and the media's screaming about a $250 million ballroom. But here's the plot twist they're conveniently leaving out. Trump's paying for the entire thing himself. No taxpayer money, no congressional earmarks, no hidden appropriations. The man literally wrote the check. It's the most Trump move imaginable. Build something huge, pay cash, and let the outrage machine spin. Still, it raises a fair question. Good optics or gold-plated distraction?
That context changes everything, doesn't it? If public money isn't being spent, then the outrage should at least cool down. Presidents have renovated the White House before, but privately funding a major expansion is unprecedented. It's Trump's brand. Big, bold, and meant to last beyond his term. What critics see as vanity, supporters see as legacy. I just caution that perception doesn't always track facts. Plenty of Americans won't read the fine print, and headlines rarely say, privately financed. But historically, presidents who invest in the physical seat of government tend to leave their stamp on history. And Trump's about to leave marble footprints.
Exactly. The media framed it like he was throwing taxpayer money around, but this man is literally proving the point he's made since 2016. He doesn't need Washington's wallet. He's building a venue that'll host veterans, Gold Star families, Medal of Honor ceremonies at zero cost to the public. Meanwhile, Democrats cry elitism while they're the ones cashing PAC checks for luxury retreats. The difference is who's footing the bill. Trump just turned their favorite talking point. Billionaires don't give back. into rubble under a crane.
You want the deeper layer? Look past the marble. The ballroom isn't just a showpiece, it's strategic real estate. The subterranean levels being dug out for communications upgrades and secure event access lines up perfectly with expanded Secret Service modernization plans. By self-funding it, Trump bypassed bureaucratic oversight that would have stalled those security improvements for years. So yeah, there's luxury on top, but underneath, it's an infrastructure move disguised as opulence. Classic 4D Trump.
Even if he's footing the bill, the timing still rubs people the wrong way. When average folks are struggling, any display of grandeur looks tone deaf. I'll give him credit. It's his money, his project, but perception matters. If the goal is symbolism, I'd rather see him fund housing for vets or expand STEM programs for kids. The gesture is impressive, but the message gets lost in the marble dust.
Fair take, Skylar. And maybe that's the bigger message. Trump's still doing what Washington can't, making moves with his own money and daring the establishment to catch up. Whether you love it or hate it, you can't deny the symbolism, self-reliance over government dependence. The guy literally put his money where his mouth is, and that's more than you can say for most of D.C. All right, that's a wrap on the main stories. We've gone from Tehran's defiance to Portland's defiance to D.C.'s decadence. And somehow, all three have the same theme: power without humility. Whether it's a supreme leader, a federal judge, or a president breaking ground on a ballroom, everyone wants control, but no one wants accountability. So as we close tonight, let's strip away the headlines and ask the bigger question. Are we becoming the thing we used to warn against? Let's go around the table. Same order, no filters. Brian, kick us off.
You know, Artie, what hits me tonight is how predictable all this has become. The enemies abroad test us because they think we've gone soft, and the elites at home act like we work for them instead of the other way around. Every week, it's another double standard. Illegal protesters get kid gloves, veterans get red tape, and now politicians get ballrooms. But here's the thing. Trump's proving that when leadership has backbone, people start remembering what national pride feels like. Iran's not laughing. Portland's not burning. The swamp's still trying, but the difference now is momentum, and it's not on their side. My final thought? America's waking up again, and when that happens, the powerful always panic. Good.
It's easy to focus on the outrage, and there's plenty of it. But what I keep circling back to is perspective. Iran's defiance, Portland's protests, the White House extravagance, all of them are symptoms of a deeper cultural exhaustion. We've lost the art of discipline and the humility of stewardship. Leadership used to mean sacrifice. Now it means trending. I'm glad the US is finally taking threats seriously again. But we also have to remember that force without foresight is just noise. We need long-term thinking, in foreign policy, in governance, and in the way we treat truth itself. Because if everything's just performance, then no one's really leading. They're just auditioning.
Laughs. You just described DC as America's longest-running reality show, and I can't even disagree. But the truth beneath the noise is what matters. Patterns, timing, coordination. When Iran taunts us, when courts suddenly rule on executive power, when the East Wing renovates, these things don't happen in isolation. They're chess moves, and we're all on the board, whether we like it or not. My advice: pay attention to what they don't televise. Follow the money, follow the networks, follow the patterns. Because the real battle for freedom doesn't start with bullets. It starts with information. Control that, and you control the future.
What I'm taking from tonight isn't cynicism. It's exhaustion. People are tired. Tired of being pawns in the power games. Tired of being told to pick sides between bad and worse. Whether it's a theocrat, a president, or a mayor, everyone's performing, and regular people are just trying to live, pay bills, and raise kids in a world that keeps moving the goalposts. I believe in accountability, but I also believe in empathy. We can't rebuild trust if every conversation starts with contempt. Maybe the real rebellion in 2025 isn't shouting louder, it's listening better.
That's a mic drop round if I've ever heard one. Here's mine. Every generation faces its own kind of empire. The question is whether we serve it or confront it. The elites throw galas while middle America grinds through inflation. The foreign tyrants posture while our own institutions lose their moral compass. But somewhere between cynicism and chaos, there's still us. The ones who refuse to give up on truth, who don't need permission to question authority, and who still believe this country is worth the fight. Remember this: patriotism isn't blind loyalty. It's courageous honesty. And that's what we do here every night. So until tomorrow, keep your head sharp, your coffee strong, and your heart grounded in the truth. I'm Artie Roy, and this is Data and Dissonance. Remember to speak truth, stir thought. Tonight's episode of Data and Dissonance is brought to you by the Caleb Rourke thriller series. The books that prove sometimes fiction tells the truth better than the headlines. Start with Book 1, The Covenant Protocol, where a covert operative uncovers a government cover-up that hits closer to home than he ever imagined. Follow it with Book 2, The Prophet Directive, where truth and deception collide in a battle between faith, freedom, and the deep state. And stay tuned for Book 3, Black Echo Rising, coming this December. If you like action, espionage, and stories that challenge the system, grab your copies on Amazon or Books to Read. Search Caleb Rourke Thriller Series or hit the links on our podcast page. Because in a world this twisted, sometimes the best way to understand reality is through a damn good story.